Welcome to Disruptive Startups. This is an event that Appster runs, and today we have Sean Shepherd with us from Growthx. Give him a round of applause.
Don't thank me yet.
And we're going to be talking, in a second I'm going to let Sean maybe tell you a little bit more about Growthx and what he's doing. But we're going to be talking about, why startups fail, which I think is a interesting topic. And hopefully some of you may take away maybe how to not fail. I'm going to point myself a little bit, so get everyone in. But again, welcome to the event, Sean. Thank you so much for coming out. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what Growthx does and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Josiah. There's no failure, there's only learning. So let's
Correct.
just remember that. Why startups learn is what we
Why
should
startups
call it.
learn.
How's that?
Next month.
Sure. Sean Shepherd, serial entrepreneur, 5-time founder, 3 wins, 2 valuable learning experiences.
There you go.
Growthx was founded a year ago. My partners and I had met. We'd all exited previous things and were kind of hanging out, looking at the next thing we were going to do. Got to know each other by helping a lot of young people transition out of non-tech careers into tech careers that weren't coders. Built a startup sales MBA program and ran that successfully and had a lot of fun doing that. We met through the course of that. One of my partners, Will Bunker, founded a little dating website called Match.com. Yeah. And the other one, Andrew Goldner, was chief tech counsel at DoubleClick, Skadden Arp's attorney, and then acquired Reuters for the Thomson Financial family and ran that, was the publisher of Reuters. Worked out of Asia there for several years. We all came back to the Valley. We'd made our successes doing other things in different markets. We came here to get plugged into this market and met that way. And what we noticed was there's a lot of wonderful product-focused founders out there that have absolutely no idea about what the market holds for them. And we were all market side people. So if you think about things in terms of the lean canvas, there's a product side and a market side to your business. And there's a lot of great investors and a lot of great accelerators and incubator programs out there that are focused on helping people develop product and raise money. But nobody was out there helping them market product and make money. And there was no help between the seed stage when you graduate from 500 or YC and when you try to present yourself to Andreessen at the A round. And given the way that the funding landscape has changed, I use this example. The first time I raised money from Guy Kawasaki and Garage and these guys, we raised $8.5 million to get to an MVP. I could build that same product today, 15, 17 years later, for about $400,000.
Yep.
Right? So it's you can get to MVP pennies on the dollar. You can learn quickly. So there's not necessarily more venture capital. There's just more to spread around because you can invest smaller amounts and learn with lean thinking and practice and principles. And if you use the right kind of applied design thinking, you can build a product and wireframe it based on what customers' development tells you, not what you think is going to change the world, which is okay too, by the way. One of the worst things Steve Jobs ever said is that people don't know what you want until you give it to them. It's ruined many a product-focused founder who hasn't not even gotten outside the building and talked to a customer. And while that's true sometimes, most times it's not. So we built a seed stage fund, $50 million fund. We're going to do about 300 deals in this fund, and we'll continue to roll this out. Write $50,000 to $100,000 checks, which aren't really that big of a deal. Our help is more important than our money. At least the companies in our fund believe that. We don't lead. We look for seed stage companies that have early customers, early revenue, indicators of potential product market fit. And then we really focus on whether or not we think we can help them grow exponentially, hence the name.
Yeah. Cool. Does that make sense, everyone?
Good. Can you explain it to me then?
So then going back to our topic for the night, why do startups really learn? But why do startups fail? I mean, you talked about product-centric founders that are so they're so focused on just product, and what are some of the reasons then that you see startups fail/learn. We'll keep saying that throughout the night.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. When you sent me that question, and I started to think about it, there's no real definitive research that exists on this topic because people are just afraid to admit failure, generally. And that's a mindset that needs to change holistically. Again, feedback is a gift. There's no failure, there's only learning. Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, right? And trust me, I've got plenty of experience. So there's the Bill Gross thesis of Idea Labs, who actually did his own data analysis on all the companies he launched, which I love, and he looked at the top criteria for success. So just reverse engineer this, right? Number one criteria was market timing. Absolutely true. My partner Will Bunker and I likes to tell me he was pitched Uber 10 or 15 different times, 10 plus years ago. The market wasn't ready, right? There's a whole series of convergence factors that have to go into creating an opportunity for an Uber to exist and for it to grow at the way it grows. Yeah. So, and then you take Andreessen saying between product, team, and market wins every time. We agree with that on its face. But tactically, operationally, you hear a lot of people say, well, we didn't have enough capital. We contend that you don't have an efficient use of that capital. That's what kills more of the startups than anything else that we see. It's the proper everybody forgets that they have a finite amount of time, money, and resources. And they don't necessarily think in broader context, what's the next lily pad? What's the next, as we call it, market milestone for my business? You got to get clear on that before anything else. And then how do you take the resources you have and properly prioritize and allocate them to achieve what you need to achieve to get to that next milestone? And what are those things? And that's where people get lost. It's really easy to get seduced by every looky-loo that says, ooh, I'm interested. Tell me more about what you do. Hey, maybe we can do this together. Hey, maybe we can help you sell this. Hey, no, come fill out my RFP, startup. Yeah, it's really easy. And then you have this investor mindset, right? You're out there raising money, you're developing a product, and you're told, I've got to talk about my market as the biggest market in the world. And then you get stuck in this cycle that is all about, well, everybody's my customer. You shouldn't be looking for Mr. Right. You should be looking for Mr. Right now, right? Who's going to help you get to that next milestone? And you have to be disciplined to this. This is a behavior. This is not a technology or a system. We can apply a methodology, and at Growthx we do that all day long. We call it our Market Acceleration Program, and we have 4 key market milestones, and it is very rote. Yeah. Having done this across multiple products and markets, I can tell you, while your product and your market may be unique, the path to product market fit is not. The same shit has to happen. I promise you. You may have a different emphasis or perception of what's important and what's not, and I respect that. But the reality is when you go back in the final analysis and you look at it, you'll see that, yes, I checked that box. So thinking about things in terms of how to properly allocate the resources that you have in a hyper-segmented market to find the right customer right now to get you the right kind of revenue. Predictable, scalable, profitable revenue is what's most important.
So you mentioned just before, inefficient use of capital and, how startups sort of waste money, or maybe they spend it on the wrong things, or maybe even it's more like prioritization of those things. But what do you sort of see as like the classic, case studies of, inefficient use of capital, I guess?
Well, what's the number one cost in any organization? Labor. How expensive is the wrong hire?
13 times annual salary, frontline.
It's just, there's nothing worse than hiring wrong and too soon, or a combination thereof. Yeah. Hire slow, fire fast. Get the right people on the bus, and make sure that that it's a stage relevant human being. And I can't overstate this enough. When you're hiring your first salesperson, or your first market side person that's going to represent you in the marketplace. And it's not you, right? It's typically you if you're a selling founder, co-founder, like I've always been. And I didn't realize this until 20 years of banging my head against the wall, that I was that person. But that's what you are. If you're the one out there acquiring customers, talking to customers, doing customer interviews, doing customer development, figuring out a way to get somebody to pay you for what you have, that's who you are. Get used to it. To sell is human. Everybody does it, and nothing happens until somebody sells something. Period, end of story. So once you recognize that, look for somebody who has the characteristics and attributes that you have as an entrepreneur. They embrace ambiguity. They have a love for product. They might be a technology geek, but not necessarily a technologist. I can't even spell HTML. It doesn't matter, right? What I do, though, is I have a love for how technology can be applied to make the world a better place. And I have a business acumen that understands how a business works, how they're measured, and what they have to do to be successful. And then I look for how I can help them be more successful, because I know, after 20 plus years of doing this, that my success comes from helping others be successful. And that needs to be your mindset and attitude when you go out into the marketplace. And the person that you bring on for the market side of your business needs to have that same mentality. They need to be able to embrace ambiguity. They need to be able to drive the product market feedback loop, advocate for the market on behalf of the market back to the product, and you need to build what your customers want. And if you do that, then your only risk becomes, are there more people that want what that person wants? That becomes the big risk, which is a hell of a lot less risky than all the other shit that you're dealing with. Mm. So a stage-relevant market side, market developer, salesperson, co-founder, etc. And if you're that person, that's the attitude that you have to have. That's the number one cost that you can avoid, hiring too soon. And don't ever hire for need. Hire for your values. It can wait. Don't acquiesce and compromise your own ideals and your own values and the culture you're trying to create because you need somebody yesterday. Okay? Don't do it, because you will regret it. And what do I mean? There are folks that have been successful selling products. This is what everybody does. Say you're selling a product into human resources, right? And you're selling a payroll and benefits technology. Just making this shit up as I go along. And I actually hate that stuff.
Do you want to say the name or?
Oh God, no! I didn't even think about that. Yeah. No, that was just a technology-enabled brokerage service that just got in and over its head. But that's all right. I'm sorry? Oh no, I'm not picking anybody. I'll pick somebody. Give me a product in a market. I don't care. But the point is that what do we do is we go find somebody who's been successful selling that product to that market somewhere else, don't we? Because they've got relationships. They've got a book of business. They've been a high performer as a salesperson somewhere. But ask yourself this question: were they there at the beginning? Were they the first hire, or were they just present for the success of the company? Because it's a very different thing to come from a cushy cubicle with referenceable customers, historical data, all the tools you need to be successful, a quota, predictability, and marketing support, and an infinite amount of leads, and everything else. That's very different than sitting in a room against a blank canvas or a whiteboard with a technical co-founder going, okay, we just built this. Who the hell do we sell it to? Very different. And that will kill your company faster than anything, especially if you're raising a couple $100,000 and then somebody comes in and expects some sort of salary and then you try to put a quota in place. What the hell are you doing that for? What are you basing that on? Well, no, blow out what? I mean, it's not even, you're making assumptions based on a mature company in a mature market and a mature product with a mature sales person who's been doing it this way and got to product market fit 10 years ago, right? Very different world. Very different. Anyway.
So then who
I don't passionately believe in this at all, just in case you were
Of course
wondering.
not.
I'm
Of course not.
frankly indifferent.
It clearly shows. So then where do you think you... where do you find these people? Is there a place?
Yes, it's located right
Indeed,
next to that missing sock graveyard. And if you can find that place, let me know. No, honestly, there's a wonderful Harvard Business Review paper by one of my mentors, not doctor, is he a doctor these days? I don't even know if he is. Mark Leslie, who was a founder of Veritas, which became the third or fourth largest software company back in the early 2000s and 90s. And he was just a software sales guy. And then he sold his company for $7 billion or whatever it was. And then he became a Sand Hill Road investor. And he started looking at these companies and saying, why does it always take them twice as long and cost them twice as much to hit the numbers that they said they were going to hit? Why does it always take longer and cost more to get to break even? And it was because of this very problem. Because you go out and you hire, mature salespeople from called coin-op sales folks, from mature companies, you put them in place, and they've got no idea how to navigate this, and the product hasn't gone through the product market fit process, and you haven't gone through what's called the sales learning curve yet. And all he did was just apply manufacturing learning curve principles to selling software.
Right.
Right. So if you're Intel and you build a chip and you want to sell that chip at scale, you figure out how to mass produce it at a certain cost before you deploy it, right? So you take a prototype and you go to your customer and you plug it in and you see if it works. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, you work on it until it does. And then you figure out how to mass produce it at a fixed cost and use cost accounting to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we don't do that in software. We bias ourselves to convince people that we have a complete product when we don't, right? And then we start selling it before it's ready to be sold. And then...
haven't done enough QA.
Yeah.
Just get it out there.
Right. And then we expect it to be adopted widely and quickly if we just scale by adding more salespeople. And then 6 months later, 12 months later, the board and the investors all blame the sales guy. It's his fault. No, it's not. You haven't gotten a product market fit yet. You haven't gone through the curve, right? So you have to be lean in this approach, and you've got to get to that. Now, how do you measure product market fit? In our view, it's a scalable CAC LTV ratio, right? Have you found a customer base at a predictable cost to acquire and a predictable lifetime value, and have you done it enough and grown it enough to where you have statistical significance relative to your market that shows and demonstrates that this thing can grow? And then maybe you can apply it to another vertical, right? Or you can continue to grow out into that segment. But they're hard to find. The point is to read that, understand it, and then seek out those attributes, and then openly talk to people about this concept and whether or not people embrace it. And don't just buy people who say, oh yeah, I love startups, I want to be in a startup. You have to understand how they perform under stress. You have to understand how they are with solving problems. You might
not necessarily be a salesperson even, like by trade.
We're all salespeople. Every last one of us. So we got to get past that.
I firmly believe that.
Well, I'm serious. You got to embrace it, right? We all have this experience of retail salespeople who are not trained well, who are forced upon us by their bosses to try and close. But when you talk to truly successful business people, they recognize the value of truly professional salespeople.
Truly, yeah.
Because their job is to help you think about how to be more competitive and how to win at what you do and how to be more successful and bring you ideas.
So then what about maybe let's take a step back, and I'm just thinking for maybe some of the product-centric folk that are out here that, maybe they're not ready, they haven't raised a seed stage, they still are the only person that's the founder, yet, based on your advice, you're basically saying, okay, well, you got to maybe figure out sales, or at least get good at it, or at least find someone, that if you don't have the money to pay them a salary, then you got to convince them to come on board. But how can someone that doesn't know sales or maybe doesn't have an affinity for it, my opinion, which I'm sure you agree with, is they better just figure it out, because you should really be a good salesperson of your product, even as the founder. But how can they start to learn sales? What would you recommend they read or learn or go and do?
So a couple of the things I think that would be critical is read things like I love 4 Steps to the Epiphany. Steve Blank did an amazing job. It's a very simple process for figuring out how to get outside the building and talk to customers and potential customers. At Growthx, we're launching our own academy specifically to train smart, talented people that want to be in non-technical roles in startups, and we're teaching them I call it the Renaissance role. Mark Leslie called it the Renaissance role. It's the Renaissance rep. And we're teaching that so that we can put these people into companies in our portfolio and other startups out there that desperately need this. Because we see so many companies that have great products and great opportunities in front of them, and because they lack market development experience and an understanding of how to properly allocate their resources and go through this methodology, they end up failing. And the key metric is always revenue, profitable, predictable revenue, whether you like it or not. So that's one way to think about it. Another is applying Spin Selling as a book is my favorite sales book, and I've read 1 million of them, and I've built, like I said, a sales program and a course. And I don't necessarily advocate for one model or methodology over another, but the reason I love Spin is Dr. Neil Rackham took a data-driven approach to developing a way to figure out whether or not what you have is a fit for the person you're talking to. It's the Spin process. He went on 35,000 sales calls over 10 years and collected all this data to understand how people buy. And never forget this in business. People buy for 1 of 3 reasons: to make money, save money, or stay out of prison. Risk, compliance, liability is that third reason, regulatory reasons. But it's always around make money, save money, or compliance. So figure out now, not what you do, but what you do for a business, and quantify that value through one of those 3 metrics. And then tell that story to people. That's how you develop your unique value proposition. That's how you get people to say, ooh, that's interesting, tell me more, right? And then you get the meeting. And then once you have the meeting, we call that the attraction framework. And then once you have the meeting, we call it the conversational framework. You develop a series of questions based on SPIN, which is an acronym: situation, problem, implication, and needs payoff. How do you do this today? What are the problems associated with it? What's the impact on your business? And what do you think the resulting need is? That's the structure. And you use that structure, and you use it to, in the most objective and unbiased way possible, get to the truth, because that's what it's about. You may not like what you find.
You may be upset.
You may be upset by it, but again, feedback is a gift. You might learn something.
You know, you were talking before earlier about, product market fit, and sometimes it's like, well, who cares about sales if, you haven't figured that piece out? And obviously, product market fit, pretty important. Can you maybe explain to the group here your definition of that, and then maybe also how that's reached?
Yeah, I think there becomes a tipping point where, you get to a unit economic that is repeatable. So again, a CAC LTV ratio that shows that you have a profitable business, that you can acquire a customer for one number, and you can generate X number of dollars in return over a certain period of time on that. And it's different for everybody. And there's some good data out there. David Skoke puts some stuff out. Joel York puts out some wonderful stuff in Chaotic Flow around CAC LTV ratios. It depends on your business and what you're doing, whether you're a recurring revenue model or transactional revenue model. There are others that would say when you go from push to pull, when that tipping point happens where you feel like you've been pushing your product and now the market is pulling you as opposed to you pushing them. But it's easy from a unit economic standpoint to measure this. Are people willing to pay you for what you do in a profitable way and at scale, right? So not just one customer, or depends again on your market and your business. Sometimes statistical significance is thousands of users. Sometimes it's 1, 2, or 3 enterprise customers.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about customer feedback and why that's important, obviously from a product perspective and a marketing perspective, all these different things. What do you think are some of the best ways to get customer feedback? I mean, obviously there's obvious ones. Talk to them. But I mean, what's the process for you? What kind of questions do you think are worth asking?
Yeah, I think you have to. You absolutely have to talk to humans. I mean, that's the whole point.
Pretty important.
And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. So you go in palms up. So the attitude when you reach out to the market as an early stage person is first identify yourself as a founder or CEO, because people like to talk to founders and CEOs because they either have been one themselves or they want to be one or they respect the fact that you had the nuts to go do what you're doing. And it intrigues them. And the whole startup world is very sexy to a lot of people. So identify yourself as a founder, co-founder, and then ask for help. I am curious. It's a great keyword, curious. Curious to know if what we're doing is interesting to you. And do you have time? And be short, respectful, executive in your prose, and direct to the point. But do it in a very supplicative manner, right? I built this thing. I made it. What do you think of it? Is it interesting to you? Would you use it? What's your feedback on that? I'd love to know if we can be helpful to you. I've helped another company like yours, so I'm hypothesizing that I can do the same for you, and I'd love to know if that's the case. And then get very unbiased questions developed and built. Des Traynor does some awesome talks on this stuff. If you guys know Des from Intercom, he from a customer interview perspective, because sometimes it's really hard as a founder. You know, it's your baby. You're
And
emotionally
to get the
attached.
truth.
Yeah, you're emotionally attached to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And getting to the truth as fast and as efficiently as quickly and efficiently as you possibly can should be your goal at all times. But structure the nature of your outreach and the conversation around that. I think I can help you. I'm curious to get your feedback to know if that's the case. And then be prepared for that and enter that conversation that way. How do you do this today? How do you perceive the problems associated with it? Back to spin, right? What's the impact in your business? What would you like to see it do? Do you budget for this sort of thing? That's super important. Don't ever forget BANT, budget, authority, need, and timing. People can tell you they love all sorts of stuff, but you'll never know until they write the check. And sometimes we're building stuff that they don't even have budget line items for. And you've got to recognize that. How do you make decisions? What's that process like? Who's involved in it? Do you have budget for something like this? And if you do, who makes the decision or who's involved in the decision-making process is a nice way of finding out who actually really has authority. And then when would you make a decision about this? Super important, because the last thing we want to do is spend 6, 8 months, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it is, working with somebody only to find out later that they can't work with us. You know what the second best answer in sales is?
Nope.
No.
Yay.
Wouldn't you rather, if you just knew that, you could just turn and allocate your resources to somebody who might say yes. And that's not a personal rejection, right? You can't take this stuff personally. Professional will. Recognize that this is just about not now. It's not a fit. Move on to the next one. And stop and analyze and employ key takeaways. Essentialism is one of my favorite books, and I'm trying to practice more of that every day in my life, which is every experience you have, take those key takeaways, 2, 3 of them. What are they? And take 30 seconds to write them down and process them and think about how that can inform the next decision you make in your business day.
I'd love to maybe hear like a case study with Growthx. It'd be interesting just to hear like, you know, what was the issue, how it was solved, and what's going on right now.
Sure. Well, there's a couple of examples. One of them was one of our very first and early investments was a company that was a marketplace connecting domestic freight carriers and domestic freight shippers. And we love business-to-business marketplaces because user acquisition is hard. B2B user acquisition is even harder. And then two sides of a marketplace is exponentially more difficult. But if you can accomplish it, it's also exponentially more valuable. And they were doing about $30,000 a month in revenue, and they were raising money at about a $6 million valuation at the time. And they hypothesized that they could go down market and acquire smaller shippers, and that those shippers would be interested in what they're doing. And we did a test case. We did a call blitz. We developed ideal customer profiles. We collected and developed a market message map around that. and put the MXP team to work on this. And we found out that of the people we contacted, 37% of them requested a quote. But then we also found out that the company was not ready to fulfill on those quotes. And we also found out that the cost to acquire a customer of that size, the way they were doing it, was way too high.
Right.
So this is a really important lesson. This was a very seasoned entrepreneur, Harvard MBA, 2-time winner in different businesses. Got into this business because he was a big shipping customer and saw the frustrations with the way that market worked. And instead of him getting pissed off and throwing excuses and all these other things, he said, "This was amazing feedback. Thank you. Can you guys continue to help me with this? Because you know what you're doing." So we changed their entire customer acquisition model, and we dropped their CAC 80%. And we took them from $30,000 a month in revenue to $2 million in 11 months. Wow. And the last valuation they raised at was $50 million. And they're doing great. And now they have a predictable model, and they know how to acquire customers in a certain way, in a way that their industry hadn't done it before, because it's a very old line business.
Yeah.
Another one that's just a quick tactical anecdote is an awesome company that was selling a product in a way that the company didn't have a budget line item for, and they didn't recognize it. So I just simply said, well, let's just change the name of that, and let's call it what they want us to call it, and let's line item it like that, and price it the way they the way they wanted it priced, and suddenly the orders started coming in. So key lesson is sell to people the way they're used to buying, especially if you're doing it in business to business.
Right. If you could give, one key piece of advice to, founders out there, or someone that's, is in the middle of running a startup, or they're starting a startup, what would it be?
Never fry bacon in the nude.
It's very important.
Just kidding. That's actually, you shouldn't do that. To me, I think the most important thing for anybody who does what you do and what we all do, I think entrepreneur is a French word for crazy person, and I embrace it and I love it. And yes, and we have some French people in the audience. Hola. Is to adopt a growth mindset. And that means that literally feedback is a gift. There is no failure, there's only learning. You need to recognize that that the only way you're going to be successful in what you do is to find a market that's willing to pay you for what you do, and people who are willing to follow you and work with you on it. Because it's not the software that wins, it's the hardware. It's you guys, it's the people. And you want to talk about another reason these startups fail is co-founders in partnerships. I mean, their divorce rate's higher than marriages, and the amount of couples counseling that you have to do when you're investing and advising and helping companies is ridiculous. And that's something we filter for and screen for all day.
How do you screen for it if you do? I mean, you catch them in the moment?
Well, so one of our big mantras is help is our due diligence.
Yeah.
We don't invest until we actually get involved in helping a company in some way. And that gives us an opportunity to work with them. And that gives us a chance to see how they behave and see how the people they work with behave. And then we certainly don't accept them into the market acceleration program until after we've invested. They're two separate decisions.
Right.
Why? Because people's behavior can change and will change and has changed when you give them money. Right? And that's okay. But as long as we know that going into it, because again, it's like making that bad hire. Sometimes it's something you can't recover from. Oh, anyway.
All right. Well, I think that's actually probably a good note. But yeah, maybe just a round of applause again for Sean. Awesome.
Thank you.